But, if they don't win, that will take us towards looking towards the offseason and what we do with our quarterback position. But a place that we should also be looking at upgrading is our wide receiving core. Davante Adams does not seem super pleased with Derek Carr now being benched. He kind of talked about it in his press conference a little bit. Not happy. He obviously left Green Bay to go to Las Vegas to go play for the Raiders, to go play with Derek Carr. And now it seems like Derek Carr, as we were talking about before the show, doesn't seem like he's going to be a Raider next year whatsoever. So, how realistic do you think it is for the Packers to trade for Davante Adams? And then do you think that the Packers should trade for Davante Adams?
It's not going to be realistic. I mean, we know what this is. Derek Carr's done as a Raider. He's going to get traded to the Bucks or to the Commanders or the Jets or somewhere. And Tom Brady's going to be the quarterback of the Raiders next year. And Davante Adams isn't going to want to leave because he'll be playing with Brady. And the Raiders won't let him leave because they'll want Brady to play with Davante Adams. So, I mean, should we trade for Davante Adams? I mean, I don't see why not. But honestly, we shouldn't, because at this point, like, trading for Davante Adams, we're going to have to give up more to get him back than what we got in return for him at the beginning of this year's offseason. Like, it's not going to be worth it in the long run, I don't think, because, like, okay, maybe Aaron Rodgers does come back next year. Maybe he does. Does he come back the year after that? Like, we're still always going to be in this constant, like, will he, won't he thing with Aaron Rodgers of, like, is this year going to be his last year? He's going to come back once again. And that's just not a good space to be in. The offense is not the worst. There have been the Packers offense has struggled for a litany of reasons. A lot of it has to do with the fact that there's been some injuries up front in the trenches, and that's where games are won. A lot of it has to do with the fact that receivers have dropped footballs a lot in the first half of the season. A lot has to do with the fact that whether he wants to admit it or not, a lack of execution on the part of Aaron Rodgers to just put the ball where it needs to be, like we've seen him do time and time again over the course of his career in Green Bay. A lot of it has to do with the fact that Matt LaFleur just refuses for some reason throughout the course of the season several times to just not get the ball in the hands of Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, whether it be as runners or as receivers out of the backfield. And then he turned around and gets on a post-game presser and says, well, it's unacceptable that we only ran the ball 5 times. Yeah, well, like, you're calling the plays, dude. Like, if you want them to run the ball more, then call more run plays. Like, that's just how it works. So I say all that to say, while I'm sure a lot of Packer fans think it would make a lot of sense for us to bring Davante Adams back, I don't think it would make a lot of sense, right? Because we're seeing Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, they're kind of coming in and they're kind of being what they need to be, which is really good receivers. And I think they've shocked a lot of us. I don't think a lot of us expected Christian Watson to be this way because we didn't see him much of the course of the offseason and training camp and the preseason. We saw Romeo Doubs, we're all shocked. We're like, oh yeah, Romeo Doubs is legit. Christian Watson, we really think so. And he's not going to win it, but he has slowly over the past couple weeks creeped his way up the charts in Vegas as far as betting odds are concerned to an offensive rookie of the year. He's not going to an offensive rookie of the year though, but he's a talented wide receiver, as is Romeo. Allen Lazard has been dealing with injuries all season. He's still talented. Could this wide receiver core be better? Absolutely, this wide receiver core could be better. But what happens when we have Davante Adams is this offense in close situations, down the stretch of football games, just becomes completely stiff. And we're only going one way. Now, granted, when you have the best receiver in football, it works. Like, you can only go the one way to Davante Adams. We've seen time and time again it work. But when you've got Christian Watson, when you have Allen Lazard, when you have Romeo Doubs, what I'm afraid of is if the Packers do decide to maybe inquire about bringing Davante Adams back, and if the Raiders say, okay, yes, let's just blow it up, and maybe they're not going the route of Tom Brady. What I don't want to happen is for us to begin to have a repeat of what happened in 2021, in 2020, 2019, 2018, and all these years when we looked at Davante Adams, he was being that guy, and down the stretch, Aaron Rodgers didn't want to look anyone else's way but Davante Adams' way, and now the offense becomes really, really stale. The offense becomes really, really stagnant. I don't want that. This is an offense that I think this season has been forced to explore its options and look other ways. Look at Lazard, look at Watson, look at Dobbs, look at Jones out of the backfield as a receiver. Look at Dillon out of the backfield as a receiver. Hell, look at Mercedes Lewis as a receiver at the tight end position, which is crazy to think about in the year of our Lord, almost 2023. So in a perfect world, honestly, Davante Adams would have never not been a Packer to begin with. He would have still been a Packer today. But if you're asking me, do I think we should give up draft capital or give up young players to go get Davante Adams and bring him back just to be right back where we were just really almost a short season ago at this time last year? I'd have to say no, because the dynamic is going to go back to being this really stressful, really stiff, really inconsistent offense when it really, really, really matters most. I get it. I don't want to go back to being regular season warrior. Like I want us to be competing for championships. And whether you guys like it or not, Packers fans, we weren't really competing for championships. We were, but we weren't. We were stiff. We just had a good team. We won the games we were supposed to win, struggled in the games that against good teams, and somehow managed to win games. Like, this is the same football team that a few short years ago was the worst 13-3 football team ever. Not like exaggerating, but like statistically, this is the worst 13-3 football team ever. Like, offensively, defensively, you look at some of the 13-3 football teams. Offensively, that Packers team was not up to par. Defensively, that Packers team was not up to par. Coaching wise, that team was not up to par. Somehow we managed to get the job done to become 13-3. Of course, we've blown it time and time again. I saw a tweet the other day, and it makes a lot of sense, right? The Packers are best when they're not the 1 seed or the 2 seed, or when there's no expectations. The Packers are at their best when they have when they have like a chip on their shoulder and no expectations. Because when Aaron Rodgers has no expectations and he chip on his shoulder, he wins back-to-back MVPs. He becomes, I think at the time, the first or maybe one of the very few 6 seeds in the history of football or the history of the NFL to win all road games and then ultimately win the NFC or the Super Bowl. Like, that is who Aaron Rodgers is when there are no expectations and he thinks everyone's counting them out. That's what we need. We don't need this Aaron Rodgers guy he's got his nose up in the air and he's got his chest poked out and he thinks he's the guy and he is, but he's not. And there's all these expectations of let's put him on the championship picture because now he wants to go on Pat McAfee's show. Love Pat McAfee, but want to go on the Pat McAfee show for Aaron Rodgers Tuesday and talk down on this team and talk down on that team and talk about this guy, talk about that guy, and then show up on Sunday and like play kind of lackluster football, but just enough football where it's not bad and they win I don't want that. I like has it been stressful this season? Of course, it's been stressful this season. But I would much rather see an Aaron Rodgers that has no expectations, that has something to prove, even though he's old. I'd much rather see an Aaron Rodgers that has no expectations where people are cutting him out than an Aaron Rodgers with expectations. Because an Aaron Rodgers that is expected to do something time and time again has showed us that he will fail. And if we bring Davante Adams back, the Packers will go back from being this team that everyone's doubting to a team that everyone thinks is supposed to be competing for a championship. And when Aaron Rodgers is expected to win championships, he doesn't win them. When he's not expected to win championships, he's in the conversation, and the Packers somehow stumble their way into a championship like we did, 12 years ago at this point almost. So, no, we should not trade for Davante Adams. Let's just focus on what we have right now and build it.
Yeah, and I honestly, I was willing to go on either side of this argument. I think the Davante Adams being upset, I think has gotten overblown a little bit. Like, everyone's he only went to Vegas to play with Derek Carr. I don't think that's 100% true.
He was also never upset either. He said that several times. He was never upset. Yeah. He just wanted to go play with his friend.
It's like he's not Davante Adams being frustrated with the Raiders now. I think is a little bit, again, overblown. Yep. People are forgetting not only, he was going there to play with his college quarterback. Yeah, Davante Adams grew up a Raiders fan. His dream was to play for the Raiders, whether now it's Vegas, used to be Oakland. He also said something in a press conference earlier this year that I think was the first home game of the season for him. Obviously, it didn't end well. It was the Cardinals one, I believe. But Davante Adams his grandparents were able to see him play professional football for the first time. And I think that means something to him. I mean, you and me have watched plenty of Davante press conferences. He's a family-oriented guy. That means something to him. Being able to have his family, his grandparents, being able to go watch him play, I think means something. So I think that he's automatically going to ask out now that he was, obviously this season and the whole reunion with Derek Carr has not gone the way he wanted it to. And it seems like they've played their last game together in the NFL, at least as members of the Raiders. But Davante Adams, I still think he wants to be a Raider. Will he eventually make his way back to green? Do I think he's going to retire a Packer? I do. Eventually, I think he's going to retire a Packer because I think he misses it there. I think you've seen kind of his Twitter over the past couple of days. He's liking purely Packers tweets. He's like, he liked something about Aaron Rodgers. He liked the video of, I think, Rasul Douglas intercepting Rasul Douglas picking off Tua. I think that genuinely he does still care about the Packers. But I think his unhappiness has been overblown a little bit. But let's play this game as if he is unhappy, because then I think it also branches off into two arguments. If Aaron Rodgers is coming back next year, I think getting Davante Adams would be smart because I think it shows that you're going all in. Because personally, what I think is going to happen is I think Rodgers plays one more season. He has one more year. Again, I don't think he's going to retire at the end of this year. He's not saying no to $63 million. He's just not whatsoever. In no world does that happen. But then I think after that, I think the Packers are going to pick up Jordan Love's 5th-year option and kind of say, that was your last year, man. Like, sorry, that was it. We gave you your last one. And I think that if Aaron Rodgers is planning on coming back, because I think the media has also kind of overblown the tradability of Aaron Rodgers, the Packers are going to take on a lot of dead cap from trading Rodgers or cutting Rodgers or Rodgers retiring. Like, the contract is bad for them every way you slice it. So I think that the tradability of Rodgers has gotten a little bit overblown, where I don't think he's not tradable. I don't think he wants to get traded. He's kind of talked about his Packers legacy multiple times. He wants to be one of the guys who retires. He was drafted a Packer. He stays a Packer. He retires a Packer, doesn't touch another uniform. The only time he's picking up another jersey is for a jersey swap. That's the only time. He doesn't want to be anybody. He does not want to be a member of any other 31 NFL franchises. But if Rodgers is coming back, I think getting Davante Adams would be a good thing, because I think, although you make very good points in terms of Rodgers has gotten too dependent on Davante Adams. You saw it in the playoff game. He wouldn't throw it to anybody else. He had Allen Lazard wide open in the middle of the field that would have put them in field goal range, and likely, if Mason Crosby eventually makes the kick, sends them to the next round of the playoffs, sends them to the NFC Championship game at home versus the Rams that they already beat by, I think, 2 or 3 scores earlier in the season. But instead, he forced it into double coverage and Davante Adams. Whether that was he just missed the read or he trusted Davante more than Allen Lazard, either way it happened.
It's always both with him. It's always, I trust Davante Adams, so damn the read.
Yeah, see, there is that. And so I understand those points. But I also think that this Packers receiving core, if they're not going to draft it all, if they're not going to draft a wide receiver, which I think they should, I've had my eyes set on Jackson Smith and Jigba for a long time. Ever since I believe it was he played in a game in 2020. It was one of the best catches I've ever seen. I'm sure you've seen the highlight too, where he it's a blowout game. Like, he was one of the backups at that point, thrown in the air. It looks like he's about to be out of bounds and he somehow gets his foot in and drags it. I've had my eyes set on him since then. So I want the Packers to take a wide receiver in round 1. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not, which is why I'm fine giving up some sort of draft assets for Davante Adams, because I think that it makes the offense a little bit more explosive. The number 1 corner is obviously going to be on Davante Adams, obviously. But then I think that it opens up Christian Watson, who I think this year has proven, although I was not a fan of him at the beginning of the year. I did not like the draft pick. I've been wrong so far. He has better hands than Marquez Valdez-Scantling did. He has better hands. He has better speed than Marquez Valdez-Scantling did. He's a better runner with the football than Marquez Valdez-Scantling was. I think that what it does is it gives them a similar wide receiving style to what the Cowboys had last year. They would have an elite route runner in Amari Cooper, Davante Adams. Obviously, Davante's a tier above Amari Cooper in the rest of his game. They would have an elite speed threat, CeeDee Lamb, versus Christian Watson, and Watson has better speed than Lamb does. And it would give them a fantastic jump ball receiver, Romeo Doubs, just like Michael Gallup. And I think that it would set this offense up to be very good for the future. But again, if Rodgers isn't coming back, just start fresh. Just start fresh. I don't think Davante's talked about one of the reasons that I think he could potentially leave. I don't think he does, but one of the reasons he could is because he talked about one of the reasons he wanted to not get out of Green Bay, but one of the reasons he wanted to go to the Vegas is because of the stability at the position. He doesn't want to have to deal with Rodgers. Oh, maybe I'm coming back, maybe I'm not. But now Carr's gone. And let's say Brady how many years does Brady have left? 1, 2, maybe, depends. He's right back in the situation that he wanted to avoid. And so I think going back to Green Bay, knowing Jordan Love, not dealing with a wild card Raiders front office of what's going to happen. Yeah, I'm sure they want Tom Brady. Does Tom Brady want to go there? I would if I was Tom Brady, but I'm not sure if he will. I think that it's going to be definitely interesting to see how Davante Adams' offseason looks. He's also not very tradable. He's in that category where I think the Raiders would take on like a $40 million dead cap hit or something crazy if they try to move on from Davante Adams. But hey, if they're looking at, a full-on rebuild or anything in the sort of that, I could see it potentially happening.